My name is Keira Washington. I am 34 years old, and I am a former forensic accountant living in Atlanta, Georgia. For 10 years, I was the woman who found the hidden money, the woman who uncovered the fraud that powerful men tried to hide, but I gave it all up to be a devoted wife to a man I worshipped. I thought I was living in a fairy tale marriage, but 72 hours ago, my entire life turned into a crime scene. My husband Dante kissed me goodbye at the security gate for a 10-day business trip to London. He told me he was doing it for our future. He told me he loved me. 3 hours later at 3 a.m. my phone rang. It was the police. They did not call to tell me his plane had crashed over the Atlantic. They called to tell me they found his car parked at the Sapphire, a cheap rundown motel 30 minutes from our house. They told me they found him in a bathtub unresponsive alongside a woman. Little did I know when I walked into that morgue to identify the body, the woman lying next to my husband was not a stranger. She was family. If you are watching this and you have ever felt the stinging pain of betrayal, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to my channel so you can witness how I turned my pain into power, and drop a comment below telling me which city you are watching from, because trust me, you are going to want to see how this ends. It all started on a rainy Tuesday night. Dante was packing his bags. He was meticulous about his suits. He packed his navy blue silk tie, the one I bought him for our 5th anniversary. He checked his passport. He checked his flight itinerary. He looked me in the eyes and held my face in his hands and said, "Keira, baby, I am going to miss you so much." I believed him. God, I was so stupid. I drove him to the airport. I watched him walk through the sliding glass doors. I drove home feeling proud of my hardworking husband. I went to sleep in our big empty bed, hugging his pillow because it still smelled like his cologne. Then the phone rang. It was a ringtone I had never heard before because it was the emergency line override. I sat up in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest. A voice on the other end said, "Is this Mrs. Keira Washington?" I said yes. He said, "This is Officer Miller from the Atlanta Police Department. We found your husband's vehicle at the Sapphire Motel. We need you to come down to verify identity." I was confused. I told the officer, "No, you must be mistaken. My husband is on a flight to London right now." The officer paused. The silence on the other line was so loud it was deafening. He said, "Ma'am, your husband never got on that plane. We found him in room 204. I do not remember the drive to the motel. I just remember the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. The Sapphire is not the kind of place a man like Dante goes. He is a senior investment banker. He wears $3,000 suits. This place smelled like stale cigarettes and regret. The police tape was already up. They would not let me in the room. They told me the coroner had already taken the bodies. Bodies, plural. That was the first time I realized he was not alone. They told me it looked like a fentanyl overdose. 2 people in the bathtub. I felt like I was floating outside of my body. I followed the police cruiser to the medical examiner's office. The air inside was freezing cold. It smelled of antiseptic and death. The medical examiner looked at me with pity in his eyes. I hate that look. I hate being the pitied wife. He pulled back the sheet on the first gurney. It was Dante. He looked like he was sleeping. His skin was gray, but he was still the man I loved. I touched his cheek. It was ice cold. I sobbed. I screamed. I asked God why he took my husband. Then the examiner said, "Ma'am, we need you to identify the second victim. We believe she may be connected to the family." I wiped my eyes. I was confused. Connected to the family. What did that mean? I walked over to the second gurney. It was smaller. The sheet was covering a petite frame. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the fabric. I pulled the sheet down. My heart stopped. The world stopped spinning. Lying there with her blonde hair matted and her lips blue was Chloe. Chloe, my brother Tevin's fiancée, my future sister-in-law, the woman who was supposed to marry my baby brother in 2 weeks, the woman I had just gone dress shopping with. She was naked, she was dead, and she had been in a bathtub with my husband. I did not scream this time. I threw up. I fell to the floor and I vomited until there was nothing left in my stomach. The betrayal was so thick I could taste it. It was bile and bitterness. My husband and my brother's wife. How long? How long had they been laughing at us? But the universe was not done with me yet. Suddenly alarms started blaring in the next room. Nurses and doctors were running. I heard someone shout, "We have a pulse! Get the crash cart!" The medical examiner looked at the monitor attached to Dante's chest. There was a faint rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. He was not dead. Chloe was gone. Her body was stiff. But Dante, that devil, he was fighting his way back from hell. They rushed him out of the morgue and into the ICU. I stood there alone in the hallway. I did not know if I should pray for him to live or pray for him to die. Part of me wanted to run into that room and unplug every machine keeping him alive. I wanted to finish the job the drugs started. But another part of me, the part that used to be a forensic auditor, the part that digs for the truth, knew that if he died, he took the answers with him. I needed to know why. I needed to know how. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. I watched the sun come up. I looked at my reflection in the window. I did not recognize myself. I used to be sharp. I was a star at Deloitte. I could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar ledger. But Dante told me I was too intense. He told me I needed to soften up to be a mother. So I quit. I stayed home. I cooked. I cleaned. I became the perfect trophy wife. And all the while he was sleeping with the white girl my brother was about to marry. He said I lacked social awareness. He said I was boring. The doors to the waiting room burst open. I expected it to be the doctor. But it was not. It was Mama Joyce, Dante's mother. She did not look worried. She looked angry. She was wearing a fur coat and sunglasses inside the hospital. She marched right up to me, and before I could even stand up, she swung her purse and hit me in the shoulder. "What did you do to him?" she screamed. Her voice echoed through the quiet hospital wing. "You witch! You did this! You put some voodoo on my son because you could not keep him happy." I stood up. I am 5'9", but Mama Joyce always made me feel small. Not today, though. Today, I was filled with a rage so hot it could melt steel. I told her Dante and Chloe were found overdosed in a motel. She did not look surprised about the affair. She did not look shocked that her son was with another woman. She looked annoyed that they got caught. Then she said something that froze my blood. She said I told him to leave you months ago. I told him Chloe was the one. She has class. She comes from a good family, not like you. You were just holding him back. She knew. His own mother knew. She knew he was sleeping with my brother's fiancée, and she encouraged it. She called it class. Because Chloe was white and came from old money, and I was just a black girl from the South Side who worked her way up. Mama Joyce looked at me with pure disgust. "You are nothing," she spat at me. "You are just a placeholder. And now that Chloe is gone, I am going to make sure you do not get a dime of my son's money when he wakes up." I looked at this woman I had cooked Thanksgiving dinner for. This woman whose bills I had secretly paid when Dante forgot. She was a monster. They were all monsters. Then my phone rang again. It was Tevin, my baby brother. My heart broke all over again. I had to tell him. How do you tell your brother that the love of his life is dead and that she died naked in the arms of your husband? I answered the phone. My voice was trembling. "Tevin, I need you to come to Grady Memorial Hospital right now. It is bad, Tevin. It is so bad." When Tevin walked in 30 minutes later, he looked like a child. He was holding a bouquet of flowers because he thought maybe I was sick. He saw my face and he dropped the flowers. I led him to the morgue first because he had to sign for Chloe. I watched the light go out of his eyes when he saw her. He wailed, a sound so primal it shook the walls. He kissed her cold forehead. He begged her to wake up. Then I had to tell him the rest. I had to tell him who she was with. I took his hand. I said Tevin she wasn't alone. She was with Dante. Tevin looked at me. He did not understand. He said Dante is in London, Keira. I shook my head. No, Tevin. They were at the Sapphire, together. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His grief turned into violence in a split second. His eyes went red. "Where is he?" he growled. I tried to hold him back, but Tevin is 6'3" and plays linebacker. He stormed up to the ICU. He barged into Dante's room. Dante was hooked up to a ventilator, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. Mama Joyce was sitting in the corner scrolling on her phone. She jumped up when Tevin rushed in. Tevin lunged for the bed. His hands were reaching for the breathing tube. "I am going to kill him," he screamed. "I am going to kill him with my bare hands." Security guards were running down the hall. Mama Joyce was screaming for help. I grabbed Tevin's waist and pulled with everything I had. "Stop, Tevin!" "Stop," I yelled. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "Why, Keira? Why should I let him live? He killed her. He took everything from me." I looked at my brother. I looked at the man in the bed who had destroyed both our lives. I looked at his evil mother cowering in the corner, and I felt something shift inside me. The tears stopped. The sadness evaporated. All that was left was cold, hard calculation. The forensic accountant was back. I pulled Tevin close and whispered so only he could hear. "We do not let him die, Tevin. Death is too easy. Death is an escape. If he dies, he never has to answer for what he did. He never has to feel the pain he caused us. No, we are going to let him live. And we are going to make his life a living hell. We are going to take everything from him, his money, his reputation, his freedom. We are going to strip him bare until he begs us to let him die." Tevin looked at me. He saw the darkness in my eyes. He slowly lowered his hands. The security guards burst into the room. I put my hands up and put on my best, terrified wife face. "I am so sorry," I sobbed, fake tears running down my cheeks. "My brother is just distraught. Please do not arrest him." As they escorted Tevin out to calm down, I turned back to the bed. I walked over to Dante. I leaned down close to his ear. Mama Joyce thought I was kissing him, but I was delivering a promise. "Wake up, Dante. Wake up so I can bury you properly." This was just the beginning. I had no idea that the rabbit hole went so much deeper. I had no idea about the secret safe in the basement. I had no idea about the baby, but I was about to find out, and when I did, I would burn their whole world to the ground. I left the hospital with the sound of the ventilator still humming in my ears. Dante was stable but critical, locked in a coma that the doctors said could last days or forever. I should have stayed by his side holding his hand, praying for a miracle like a good wife. But I was done being a good wife. The Keira who drove home that afternoon was not the same woman who had driven to the morgue that morning. The tears had dried up, leaving behind a scorched earth landscape of anger and questions. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. The drive to our house in the suburbs felt like a funeral procession of one. This was the house I had picked out, the house I had decorated, the house I thought we owned free and clear. I pulled into the driveway and stared at the manicured lawn. Dante always insisted on the best landscaping. Appearances meant everything to him. I walked through the front door and the silence hit me like a physical blow. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hides things. I walked straight past the kitchen, past the living room with the family photos on the mantel, and went directly to Dante's home office. He called it his sanctuary. He always kept the door locked, telling me he had sensitive client files that I could not see. I used to respect that. I used to think he was protecting his client's privacy. Now I knew he was protecting his own dirty secrets. I did not have the key, but I did not need one. I went to the garage, grabbed a crowbar from his tool chest, and marched back inside. With one violent swing, I shattered the lock mechanism. The wood splintered. The door swung open. It felt good. It felt like the first real thing I had done in years. The room smelled like him, sandalwood, expensive scotch, and arrogance. I turned on the light. My eyes scanned the room. I was not looking for files on his desk. I was looking for what was not on the desk. I was looking for the safe. I knew he had one. I had seen him closing a panel in the back of his closet once when I brought him coffee. He had jumped, claiming he was just organizing shoes. I walked into the closet and pushed aside his rows of designer suits. Gucci, Armani, Tom Ford, thousands of dollars of fabric hanging there while I shopped at Target to save for our retirement. I ran my hands along the back wall. There it was, a subtle seam in the drywall. I pried the panel loose. Behind it sat a heavy steel safe, a biometric and keypad combination. I stared at the keypad. I knew I could not use his fingerprint since he was comatose in a hospital bed. But Dante was arrogant, and arrogant men are predictable. They think they are smarter than everyone else, so they get sloppy. I tried our anniversary. Error. I tried his birthday. Error. I tried our daughter's birthday. Error. I paused. My forensic auditor brain kicked into high gear. Think Keira. Think like the criminal. Who was on his mind? Who was he risking everything for? Who was he with when he died? My fingers hovered over the keys. I felt sick just thinking about it. I typed in the numbers. 082498. Chloe's birthday. August 24th, 1998. The light turned green. The heavy click of the latch unlocking echoed in the small closet. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. He had used his mistress's birthday as the code to his most private life. The disrespect was so loud it was screaming. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside were stacks of papers, hard drives, and cash. I bypassed the cash. I did not care about the loose bills. I wanted the paper trail. In my line of work, we have a saying, "Numbers do not lie, only people do." And these numbers were about to sing like a canary. I sat down on the floor of the closet and started sorting. The first thing I found was a stack of photos, Polaroids, explicit ones. Dante and Chloe in our bed. Dante and Chloe on a boat. Dante and Chloe in Paris on a trip he told me was a banking conference in Chicago. I looked at the dates on the back. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this was not a fling. This was a parallel life. But the photos were just the emotional knife. The financial documents were the bullet to the head. I picked up a thick blue folder. It was a mortgage deed. My hands started to shake. The address was our address, but the date was from 6 months ago. I flipped to the terms. A second mortgage. He had taken out a second mortgage on our home. $500,000. I scanned the signature line. There was his signature bold and sweeping. And next to it was mine. I traced the ink with my finger. It looked like my signature. It had the same loops, the same slant. But I had never signed this. He had forged my signature. He had put our home, the roof over our child's head, at risk to get $500,000 in cash. Where did the money go? I dug deeper into the safe. I found the answer in a purchase agreement for a property in Buckhead, the penthouse at the Sovereign, one of the most exclusive buildings in Atlanta. The purchase price was $2 million. The down payment was exactly $500,000. I looked at the name on the deed. It was not Dante Washington. It was Chloe Miller. He had leveraged our family home to buy a penthouse for his mistress. He stole our security to give her luxury. I felt the bile rising in my throat again, but I swallowed it down. I could not afford to be sick. I had to keep digging. I found a file labeled College Fund. I opened it expecting to see the statements for the 529 plan we had started when our daughter was born. We had contributed every month for 10 years. There should have been over $100,000 in there. I opened the latest statement. Balance zero. My vision blurred. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the red haze. Zero. He had liquidated our child's future. He had stolen from his own flesh and blood. The withdrawal slip was dated 3 days before his trip to London. The memo line just said, transfer. I threw the file across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying thud and papers scattered everywhere. That monster. That absolute monster. He did not just cheat on me. He plundered us. He cannibalized his own family to feed his ego and his addiction to that woman. But the worst was yet to come. At the bottom of the safe was a stack of unopened envelopes. They were addressed to me, Keira Washington. But the return addresses were credit card companies and banks I did not bank with. American Express, Chase Sapphire, Discover. I tore open the first one. An American Express Platinum card. Balance due $78,000. Past due notices. The charges were nauseating. Cartier, Tiffany, the Four Seasons. First-class flights to Milan. I opened the next one. Chase. Balance due $45,000. I opened the third. A personal loan from a predatory lender. $50,000. I did the math in my head instantly. Almost $200,000 in unsecured debt. All in my name. All authorized by me, supposedly. He had used my social security number, which he knew by heart. He had opened these accounts, intercepted the mail, and hidden the cards. He was living the life of a king on my credit. I sat there amidst the wreckage of my financial life. I was not just a betrayed wife. I was a victim of identity theft. I was broke. Actually, I was worse than broke. I was drowning in debt that wasn't mine but legally belonged to me. If Dante died right now, these debts would not disappear. They were attached to my Social Security number. The creditors would come for me. They would take the house. They would garnish my wages if I ever went back to work. He had set me up. The realization washed over me, cold and terrifying. This was not just about funding his affair. This was an exit strategy. He was planning to leave me. He was going to run off with Chloe to that penthouse and leave me with the wreckage. He was going to leave me homeless, bankrupt, and broken with a child to raise. That is why he went to London, or why he said he was going. He was probably moving assets. He was probably finalizing the end of us. I looked at the mortgage papers again. If I missed a payment, the bank would foreclose. I looked at the credit card statements. Minimum payments due immediately. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The panic was trying to take over. The old Keira, the soft housewife Keira, wanted to curl up in a ball and cry until someone came to save her. But no one was coming to save me. Dante was in a coma. My brother was grieving a dead fiancée. My mother-in-law was an enemy combatant. I was on my own. I opened my eyes. I looked at the papers scattered on the floor. To anyone else, this looked like a disaster. But to me, to the woman who used to hunt down corporate embezzlers for a living, this looked like evidence. I stood up. My knees cracked. I dusted off my pants. I walked over to Dante's desk and swept his useless decorative paperweights onto the floor. I sat down in his leather chair. It was too big for me, but I made myself fit. I adjusted the height until I was sitting tall. I picked up the forged mortgage document. I picked up the credit card statements. I picked up the deed to the penthouse. "You made a mistake, Dante," I whispered to the empty room. "You forgot who you married. You forgot that before I was your wife, I was the best forensic auditor in the state of Georgia. You thought you could hide the money trail from the bloodhound." I turned on his computer. I cracked his password in 3 tries. Of course it was Chloe 123. Predictable. I pulled up a spreadsheet. I started entering data. I was going to trace every penny. I was going to find every hidden account. I was going to document every forgery. He had stolen my money. He had stolen my credit. He had stolen my trust. But he had left the paper trail. And that was his fatal error. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I was not tired. I was fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and hatred that was more potent than any caffeine. "I am not going to the poorhouse, Dante," I said to the glowing screen. "I am going to take back what is mine. And then I am going to take what is yours." I started typing. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was rhythmic. It sounded like a drum beat, a war drum. I worked through the night. I found the shell companies. I found the transfers. I found where he was hiding the rest of the cash. By the time the sun came up painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I had a complete map of his financial crimes. I printed everything. I made copies. I scanned them to a cloud server he did not know existed. Then I went to the safe and put everything back exactly how I found it. I locked the panel. I put the suits back in place. I fixed the lock on the door as best I could so it looked like it was just jammed, not broken. I walked out of that office. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her eyes were red. Her hair was messy, but her jaw was set. Her eyes were cold. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I poured a cup and stood by the window watching the sunrise. The phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Washington," the nurse said, "your husband is showing signs of increased brain activity. The doctor thinks he might be emerging from the deepest stage of the coma." I took a sip of coffee. It was black and bitter, just how I liked it now. "That is wonderful news," I said, my voice dripping with fake concern. "Please tell him I am on my way. And tell him I have a surprise for him." I hung up the phone. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed the file of evidence I had just compiled. Dante was waking up. Good, because I was just getting started. He thought he was the one playing games. He thought he was the chess master moving pieces around the board. But he did not realize that while he was sleeping, I had already captured his king. I walked out to the car. The morning air was crisp. I felt dangerous. I felt powerful. I felt like the hunter. I drove back to the hospital not as a victim visiting her sick husband, but as a prosecutor visiting the defendant. The game was on, and I was going to win. The doctors called it a miracle when Dante opened his eyes, but when I looked into them, I saw something else entirely. I saw absolute terror. It was 3 days after I had raided his safe, and 3 days since I had decided to become the architect of his misery instead of the victim of his betrayal. The lead neurologist, Dr. Patel, gathered us in the room. Mama Joyce was there, clutching her pearls and wailing theatrically. I stood by the window, dry-eyed and stoic, playing the role of the traumatized wife to perfection. Dr. Patel cleared his throat and delivered the news that would change the trajectory of my revenge. He told us that while Dante was awake and cognitive, he had suffered a massive stroke in the brainstem. It was a condition called locked-in syndrome. I listened carefully as the doctor explained that my husband, the man who used to command boardrooms and charm women with a flash of his smile, was now a prisoner in his own body. He could hear everything. He could feel everything. He could understand every word we were saying. But he could not move. He could not speak. He could not even grimace. The only thing he could control was the vertical movement of his eyes. Blink once for yes, blink twice for no. That was his entire world now. Mama Joyce collapsed into a chair, screaming about how unfair God was, but I did not scream. I looked at Dante. He was staring right at me. His pupils were dilated. He was trying to scream, I could see it. He was trying to thrash and run and command, but he was just a slab of meat on a hospital bed, a very expensive, very helpless slab of meat. And in that moment, I realized that God was not unfair. God was actually very poetic. Dante had spent his whole life trying to control me, trying to silence me, trying to keep me in a box. And now he was the one in the box. I walked over to the bed. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. His skin was warm. I felt his heart racing against my chest. I knew he was panicking. I brushed the hair off his face with the tenderness of a mother and looked up at the doctor with tears glistening in my eyes. I asked him if Dante could feel pain. The doctor said, yes, he has full sensation, he just cannot react to it. I nodded slowly, letting that information sink in. Full sensation, no ability to react. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in manipulation. I became the Florence Nightingale of the ICU. I learned how to suction his breathing tube. I learned how to change his feeding bag. I learned how to rotate him to prevent bed sores. The nurses were amazed. They kept telling me how lucky Dante was to have such a devoted wife. They told me most spouses would have put him in a long-term care facility by now. But not Mrs. Washington. No, Mrs. Washington insisted on doing everything herself. I fired the private nurses Mama Joyce tried to hire. I told them I did not want strangers touching my husband. I told Mama Joyce to go home and rest, that she looked tired, and I had everything under control. I played the dutiful, exhausted martyr so well that by the time I requested to have Dante moved to a private room at the end of the hall so he could have more peace, the hospital administration bent over backward to accommodate me. Finally, the moment came. It was 2 a.m. The hospital was quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic whooshing of the ventilator pushing air into Dante's lungs. Whoosh, click, whoosh, click. It was a hypnotic sound. I got up from the uncomfortable sleeper chair and walked over to the door. I closed it gently. I pulled the blinds shut, blocking out the sliver of light from the hallway. I walked over to the bed. Dante's eyes were open. They followed me as I moved. He looked terrified. He should be. I pulled a chair right up to the side of the bed. I sat down and crossed my legs. I took a sip of my water. I just watched him for a long time. I let the silence stretch out until it was suffocating. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to anticipate. Then I leaned in close, so close that my lips were brushing against his ear. I dropped the sweet, grieving wife voice. My voice dropped an octave. It became cold, hard, and flat. "Hello, husband," I whispered. His eyes widened. He blinked rapidly. I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. I told him to save his energy. I told him we had a lot to talk about, and he was going to need his strength to listen. I reached into my bag and pulled out the copy of the mortgage deed I had found in the safe. I held it up in front of his face. I saw his eyes lock onto the paper. I saw the recognition. "I know everything, Dante," I said softly. "I know about the second mortgage. I know about the credit cards. I know about the college fund you stole, and I know about the penthouse." I watched a single tear leak out of the corner of his eye. It rolled down his temple and disappeared into his hairline. He was crying. Was it regret? Was it fear? I did not care. I put the paper down and picked up a wet washcloth. I started to wipe his face. It was a caring gesture, but I did it with a little too much pressure. I scrubbed his forehead hard. "But that is just money, Dante." I continued, my voice smooth as silk. "Money we can fix. Money is just paper. But people are harder to fix." I paused. I leaned in closer again. I could smell the antiseptic soap they used to wash him. "You are probably wondering about Chloe," I said. His eyes darted back and forth, up and down. He was desperate for news. He loved her. Or at least he lusted after her enough to destroy our lives. "I have some bad news, baby," I whispered. Chloe did not make it. I felt his whole body tense up. The monitor, specifically the heart rate monitor, started to beep faster. Beep, 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 beep. "She is dead, Dante. Stone cold dead. They put her in a body bag right next to you at the motel. I saw her. She looked terrible. Blue lips, gray skin. Not very pretty anymore." The monitor was screaming now, high-pitched alarms. I calmly reached over and hit the silence button on the machine. "I did not want the nurses coming in. She is gone," I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "And do you know what the funny part is? Everyone thinks you are the victim. Everyone thinks you just got caught up in something bad. But I know the truth. I know you were leaving me. I know you were going to run away with her to that penthouse and leave me and your daughter with nothing but debt." I took his hand, his limp, heavy hand. I squeezed it, hard. I dug my nails into his palm. I knew he could feel it. I knew it hurt, but he could not pull away. "But here is the thing, Dante. I am not going to let you die. Death would be a release. Death would mean you get to go be with Chloe in hell, and I am not that generous." I stood up and loomed over him. I cast a shadow over his face. "You belong to me now. You are going to live, Dante. You are going to live for a very, very long time. I am going to keep you alive with the best medical care my money can buy. And every single day you are going to lay here and think about what you did. You are going to watch me sell your assets. You are going to watch me take over your life. You are going to watch me rise while you rot in this bed." He was blinking frantically now. Blink, blink, blink. Maybe he was begging. Maybe he was trying to say sorry. I brought my face back down to his. "Do not try to talk," I hissed. "You lost your voice when you decided to lie to me. Now you just listen. You work for me now. Your job is to stay alive so I can collect your disability checks. Your job is to stay alive so I can sue the insurance company. You are my cash cow, Dante. And I am going to milk you for every single dime you stole from me." I kissed him on the cheek again. It was the kiss of Judas. "Good night, darling," I said sweetly. "Sleep tight. I will be right here when you wake up. I will always be right here." I sat back in the chair and opened my book. I read quietly while my husband lay there trapped in his own body, screaming silently into the void. This was my house now. This was my game. And I had just made the opening move. The doctor said he was locked in. But they were wrong. He wasn't locked in. He was locked up. And I was the warden holding the only key. The next morning, when the nurse came in to check his vitals, she commented on how high his blood pressure was. She asked if he seemed distressed during the night. I looked up from my coffee and smiled a warm, genuine smile. "Oh no," I said. "He slept like a baby. I think he is just happy to be alive. Aren't you, sweetie?" I looked at Dante. He stared back at me with wide, unblinking eyes. He blinked once. Yes. That is a good boy, I thought. He is learning already. This went on for weeks. The days were filled with flowers and visitors. Mama Joyce would come in and cry and hold his hand and talk about how evil I was for not crying enough. She would tell him, "Don't worry, son, as soon as you get better, we are going to get rid of her." She didn't know that he could hear every word. She didn't know that every time she threatened me, she was just tightening the noose around her own neck. Because Dante knew who held the power now. He knew that if I walked away, if I pulled the plug on my care, he would be left with his mother. And as much as he loved his mommy, he knew she was incompetent. He knew I was the only thing standing between him and a dirty nursing home. So he blinked yes when I asked if he was comfortable. He blinked yes when the doctors asked if he was happy with his care. He became my puppet. But the nights were mine. One night I brought in the laptop. I set it up on the tray table so he could see the screen. "I want to show you something, Dante," I said. I opened up his investment portfolio, the one he thought I couldn't access. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a graph that was nosediving. "This is your tech stock portfolio. I sold it all this morning." His eyes widened. That portfolio was his pride and joy. "I sold it at a loss," I continued casually. "Because I needed the cash to pay off the credit card you opened in my name." I watched the pain wash over his face. It hurt him more than the physical pain. Money was his god, and I was desecrating his altar. And this I clicked to another tab. "This is the listing for the penthouse. I put it on the market today. Fire sale price. I just want to get rid of it." He blinked twice rapidly. No, I laughed. "Oh yes, Dante, it is gone. And the money from the sale, it is going into a trust fund for our daughter. A trust fund that you can never touch." I leaned in close again. "I am taking it all back, Dante. Every cent. You are going to be a poor man, a poor, paralyzed man." He looked at me with such hatred that if looks could kill, I would have dropped dead on the spot. But hatred is good. Hatred keeps the heart beating. Hatred keeps the blood pumping. I needed him to hate me. Because as long as he hated me, he would fight to stay alive to spite me. And I needed him alive. Because the best part of my plan was not the money. It was the secret I was keeping for the grand finale. The secret about the baby. The secret about his mother. I was saving those nuggets for later. I was feeding him poison 1 spoonful at a time. I adjusted his pillow. "Rest up, baby," I whispered. "Tomorrow is a big day. The lawyer is coming. We need to update your will. And since you cannot write, I will be helping you sign." I turned off the light. "Good night, my love." I slept soundly that night. For the first time in months, I did not have nightmares. Because I was the nightmare now. The peace of the hospital room was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished reading the financial section of the newspaper to Dante, who lay there blinking his eyes in silent misery. I enjoyed reading him the stock market reports because every time I mentioned a company he used to invest in, I saw his heart rate monitor spike. It was our little daily ritual of torture. But then the door flew open and the hurricane known as Mama Joyce blew in. She was not alone. Trailing behind her, like a lost puppy in a cheap suit, was a man holding a beat-up leather briefcase. He looked like the kind of lawyer you find on a billboard next to the highway advertising quick cash for car accidents. Mama Joyce did not say hello. She did not ask how her son was doing. She marched right up to the foot of the bed and pointed a manicured finger at me. "She is still here," she screeched. "I told you to get out of my son's room." I stood up slowly. I smoothed out my skirt. I kept my face calm. "Hello, Joyce," I said. "Who is your friend?" The man stepped forward and cleared his throat. He tried to look authoritative, but his tie was crooked, and he smelled like stale coffee. "Mrs. Washington," he said. "I am Arthur Sterling. I represent Mrs. Joyce Washington. We are here to discuss the matter of Dante's care and his assets." I looked at Dante. His eyes were wide. He was blinking rapidly. Blink, blink, blink. He was panicking. He knew his mother better than anyone. He knew that if she was here with a lawyer, she was not here to help him. She was here to help herself. I crossed my arms. "There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Sterling," I said. "I am his wife. I am his next of kin. I am making the decisions." Mama Joyce laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound. "Not for long," she said. She reached into the man's briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. She slammed them onto the tray table right in front of Dante's face. "Sign these," she demanded. I looked at the papers. It was a petition for emergency guardianship. She was trying to declare me unfit. She was trying to take legal control over Dante, and more importantly, control over his finances. I picked up the document and read the first paragraph out loud. Petitioner claims that the current guardian, Keira Washington, is abusive, negligent, and mentally unstable. Petitioner claims that Keira Washington has a history of violence and is a danger to the patient. I looked up at Joyce. Violence, I asked. I have never hurt a fly, Joyce. She sneered at me. We know what you did, she hissed. We know you are the reason he is in that bed. You probably poisoned him. You probably drugged him so you could steal his money. But I am not going to let you get away with it. I am taking my son back. And I am taking his checkbook, too. I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. This was a game of chess, and she was playing checkers. She thought she could bully me. She thought I was just the ignorant daughter-in-law she had looked down on for 10 years. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I looked at Dante again. He was staring at his mother with pure hatred. He knew what she wanted. She did not care if he recovered. She wanted access to his disability insurance. She wanted the payout from his life insurance policy, which she probably thought she was still the beneficiary of. She did not know I had already found the policy. She did not know I was already 2 steps ahead. I decided to play along. I decided to act scared. Joyce, please, I said, letting my voice tremble. I am doing my best. I love him. I am taking care of him 24 hours a day. She scoffed. You are doing a terrible job, she said. Look at him. He is skinny. He looks miserable. You are starving him. You are torturing him. Mr. Sterling, tell her what happens if she does not sign. The lawyer stepped forward again. Mrs. Washington, he said, if you do not sign over guardianship voluntarily, we will be forced to take this to court. We have witnesses who are willing to testify to your erratic behavior. We will paint a picture of a vengeful wife who is punishing her husband. The judge will not only strip you of your rights, but he might even grant a restraining order. You will never see your husband again. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. My fingers wrapped around my phone. I pressed the record button on the voice memo app. I just want what is best for him, I whispered. Then sign the papers, Joyce shouted. Sign them and get out. You are useless, Keira. You have always been useless. You were never good enough for him. He only married you because he felt sorry for you. He needed a woman with class, a woman like Chloe. I looked up sharply. Chloe is dead, Joyce, I said. Good, Joyce spat back. At least she died with dignity. Unlike you, clinging to a man who does not want you. But do not worry about Chloe. She left something behind, something that is going to make us very rich. I froze. This was it. This was the moment. I needed her to keep talking. What do you mean? I asked. What did she leave behind? Joyce smiled a wicked, greedy smile. She thought she had won. She thought I was defeated. She thought she could brag. You really are stupid, aren't you? She said. You thought Dante was just sleeping with her. You thought it was just sex. No, honey. They were building a family. They have a son. I gasped. It was a fake gasp, but the shock was real. I had suspected it when I found the payments in the bank statements labeled childcare, but hearing her say it out loud was different. A son, I repeated. Dante has a son. Yes, Joyce said, puffing out her chest. My grandson. He is 1 year old. He has Dante's eyes and Chloe's skin. He is beautiful, and he is the golden ticket. She walked over to the window and looked out at the city. Chloe's parents are billionaires, Keira. Billionaires. They do not know about the baby yet. Chloe kept him hidden because she was afraid of what her father would do. But now that she is dead, I am going to introduce them to their grandson. And do you know what they are going to do? They are going to pay me. They are going to pay me millions just to keep it quiet. Or they are going to pay me millions to be in his life. Either way, I win. I looked at Dante. Tears were streaming down his face. He was not crying from sadness. He was crying from shame. His mother was talking about selling his secret child like a piece of livestock. She did not care about the baby. She saw a paycheck. So that is what this is about, I said quietly. You do not want to take care of Dante. You want guardianship so you can legally claim the child. You need Dante's rights to get to the baby. Joyce turned around. Her eyes were cold. I need resources, she said. Raising a child takes money, and since my son is a vegetable, someone has to manage his empire. That someone is me. Now sign the papers. I looked at the lawyer. He looked uncomfortable. Even he knew this was messy. I took a deep breath. I had what I needed. I had her on tape admitting that she wanted to use the baby for extortion. I had her admitting that she considered her son a vegetable. I had everything. I straightened my back. The tears vanished. The trembling stopped. I looked Mama Joyce dead in the eye. "No," I said. "What did you say?" she asked, stepping closer. I said no. I repeated, my voice strong and clear. "I am not signing anything, and you are going to leave. Now!" Joyce's face turned purple. "You cannot talk to me like that," she screamed. "I am his mother." "And I am his wife," I shouted back. "And as long as his heart is beating, I am the one in charge. I know about the baby, Joyce, and now I know what you plan to do with him. You are disgusting. You would sell your own grandchild for a new fur coat." She lunged at me. She actually raised her hand to slap me. But I caught her wrist in midair. I squeezed it hard. "Do not ever touch me again," I said, low and dangerous. I turned to the lawyer. "Mr. Sterling, I suggest you take your client and leave before I call security. And if you ever file a false motion against me in court, I will report you to the Bar Association for harassment. Do I make myself clear?" The lawyer looked terrified. He grabbed his briefcase. "Mrs. Washington, let's go," he said to Joyce. "We can handle this through official channels." Joyce pulled her arm free. She smoothed her hair. She looked at Dante one last time. "You are making a mistake, Keira," she spat. "You are going to regret this. I will destroy you." "Get out!" I said, pointing to the door. She stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the linoleum floor. The lawyer scurried after her. The room fell silent again. The only sound was the ventilator. Whoosh! Click. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I pressed stop on the recording. I played it back just to be sure. Joyce's voice filled the room loud and clear, admitting to the secret baby and the blackmail plot. I looked at Dante. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. I walked over to the bed. I sat down next to him. "Did you hear that, Dante?" I asked softly. "Your mother loves you so much, doesn't she? She does not care if you live or die. She just wants the baby." He blinked twice. "No." I sighed. "I know you have a son, Dante," I said. "I know about the little boy. And now I know where he is. Joyce thinks she is going to get him. She thinks she is going to use him to get rich." I leaned in close. "But I am not going to let that happen. That little boy is innocent. He did not ask to be born into this mess. He does not deserve to be raised by a wolf like your mother." Dante looked at me with confusion. He expected me to hate the child. He expected me to want the child dead. "I am going to find him, Dante, I promised. I am going to find him before she does. And I am going to make sure he goes to the only people who can actually protect him." I stood up and walked to the window. I watched Mama Joyce getting into her car down in the parking lot. She was on the phone, probably screaming at someone else. "You thought you could hide a whole life from me," I whispered to the glass. "You thought I was stupid. But now I hold all the cards. I have your money. I have your freedom. And soon I will have your son." I turned back to my husband. "Rest up, baby. We have a busy day tomorrow. We are going to find your son, and we are going to ruin your mother's life." I sat back down and picked up the newspaper. "Now where were we?" I asked. "Ah, yes. Tesla is down 5%. Isn't that a shame?" I continued to read while Dante stared at the ceiling, trapped in the prison of his own making, listening to the voice of the woman he underestimated, dismantling his life brick by brick. The recording on my phone was burning a hole in my pocket. It was not just a shield, it was a sword, and I was ready to swing it. The recording of Mama Joyce admitting to the existence of a secret child was the smoking gun I needed, but it was also a map. She had mentioned a specific location, a specific caregiver. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop tracing the digital footprint of my husband's betrayal. I found it in the bank statements I had downloaded from the safe, a recurring monthly payment of $3,000 to a woman named Evelyn, distinct from the household expenses. It was labeled simply consulting, but I knew better. My husband did not have consultants living in a 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet suburb of Decatur. He had a nanny, and that nanny was guarding the living, breathing proof of his double life. I drove there the next morning. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I did not know what I was going to do when I got there. Did I want to see the child? Did I want to scream at the woman harboring him? I just knew I could not let Mama Joyce get there first. If she got custody of that baby, she would use him as a pawn to control Dante's estate and, by extension, my life. I pulled up to the house. It was unassuming. A tricycle in the driveway, a wreath on the door. It looked like a happy home. A home paid for with my money. With the money meant for my daughter's college fund. The rage flared up in my chest, hot and suffocating, but I pushed it down. I needed to be cold. I needed to be the auditor. I knocked on the door. A middle-aged woman answered. She looked kind. She looked like a grandmother. When she saw me, her face went pale. She knew who I was. Dante must have shown her pictures. Or maybe she just saw the resemblance to the woman whose life her employer had destroyed. "Mrs. Washington," she stammered. "I was not expecting you." I walked past her without an invitation. The house smelled like baby powder and formula. It was a smell that used to bring me joy, but now it made me nauseous. "Where is he?" I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. Evelyn pointed a shaking finger toward the living room. I walked in, and there he was. Sitting in a playpen surrounded by expensive toys was a baby boy. He looked to be about a year old. He was pulling himself up on the mesh sides of the pen, giggling at a cartoon playing on the television. I stopped dead in my tracks. The air left my lungs. He was beautiful. That was the first thing that hit me. He was undeniable. He had light skin, a creamy caramel color that was the perfect blend of Dante's deep brown and Chloe's porcelain white. He had soft, curly hair, but it was his eyes that tore my heart out. He had Dante's eyes, the same shape, the same deep, dark, intense stare. He looked up at me and smiled a gummy, toothless smile. He looked so much like my husband. It was like looking at a ghost. This was the child Dante had wanted with me. This was the son he always talked about. But he had him with her, with my brother's fiancée. I felt a wave of dizziness. I grabbed the back of a sofa to steady myself. This innocent little boy was a monster. He was a symbol of the ultimate betrayal. Every time I looked at him, I would see Dante's lies and Chloe's deception. Before I could process my emotions, a black SUV screeched into the driveway outside. Car doors slammed. I looked out the window. It was not Mama Joyce. It was the Millers, Chloe's parents, Richard and Eleanor Miller. They were old money Southern aristocracy. They were the kind of people who smiled to your face and voted against your rights behind your back. They had never liked Tevin. They thought he was not good enough for their daughter. Now I knew why they had been so quiet since Chloe's death. They knew. They burst into the house bringing a cold wind with them. Eleanor was wearing a black funeral dress and pearls. Richard was in a suit. They stopped when they saw me. The disdain on their faces was instant. "Mrs. Washington." Richard said, his voice dripping with ice. "What are you doing here?" "I am looking at my husband's son," I said, standing my ground. "The question is, what are you doing here? You just lost your daughter. Shouldn't you be planning a funeral instead of harassing a nanny?" Eleanor stepped forward. She did not look at the baby. She looked at me with pure venom. "We are here to clean up this mess," she hissed. "We are here to take the child. Take him where I asked." "Away," Richard said. "Europe. Boarding school eventually. Somewhere he can be raised without complications." I laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Complications," I repeated. "You mean without the world knowing that your perfect, pure daughter was sleeping with her fiancé's brother-in-law? You mean without the country club knowing she had a mixed-race baby out of wedlock? You do not want him. You want to hide him." Eleanor flinched. I had hit a nerve. "He is our blood," she said defensively, but her eyes betrayed her. She was looking at the baby like he was a stain on her expensive carpet. "He is a mistake, a tragedy, but we will not let him become a scandal. We are willing to compensate you, Mrs. Washington. We know you control Dante's assets now. We will pay you a significant sum to sign over any rights Dante might have and to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We want this buried." They were trying to buy me. Just like Mama Joyce, they thought money could fix the hole in the universe where their morality should be. They wanted to erase this little boy's identity to protect their reputation. But before I could answer, the front door flew open again. This time it was not a polite entry. The door banged against the wall. Tevin stood there. My brother looked like a man who had walked through hell. His eyes were bloodshot. His shirt was torn. He had clearly been drinking. He was breathing heavy like a wounded animal. "Keira," he rasped. I had texted him the address. I wanted him to know the truth. But now seeing him here, seeing the madness in his eyes, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. "Tevin, do not come in here," I said, stepping between him and the playpen. But he saw. He looked past me and saw the little boy staring back at him with Dante's eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "It is true," he yelled. "It is real." He stumbled into the room. The Millers backed away, looking terrified of the angry black man in their presence. Evelyn, the nanny, cowered in the corner. Tevin stared at the baby. The baby started to cry, sensing the danger in the room. "That is him," Tevin whispered. "That is the bastard. That is the thing she died for." He took a step toward the playpen. His hands were clenched into fists. He was not seeing a baby. He was seeing the betrayal. He was seeing Dante and Chloe in that bed. He was seeing the destruction of his life wrapped in a diaper. "I am going to end it," Tevin shouted. "I am going to end it all. He should not exist. He is a demon, Keira. Look at him. He looks just like him." Tevin lunged. I moved on instinct. I threw myself in front of my brother. I slammed my hands against his chest, pushing him back with all the strength I had. "No, Tevin," I screamed. "Stop!" He fought me. He was stronger than me. He was frantic. "Move, Keira," he roared. "Let me do it. Let me kill it. It is an abomination." I slapped him. I slapped my own brother across the face as hard as I could. The sound echoed through the room, silencing the baby's cries for a split second. Tevin stopped. He looked at me shocked. "Look at me," I commanded, grabbing his face in my hands. "Look at your sister." He was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "That is a baby Tevin. That is an innocent 1-year-old baby. He did not ask to be born. He did not choose his parents. He is not Dante. He is not Chloe. He is just a boy." Tevin collapsed. He fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "But it hurts, Keira," he wailed. "It hurts so much. Every time I look at him, I see them laughing at me." I dropped to my knees and hugged him. I held him while he cried the ugly, guttural cry of a broken man. I glared at the Millers over his shoulder. They were watching with a mix of horror and disgust. They were judging us. They were judging our pain. I stood up. I pulled Tevin up with me. I positioned him behind me, shielding him from their gaze. I turned to the Millers. My voice was low and deadly. "You want to bury this?" I asked. "You want to pretend this boy does not exist?" Richard nodded slowly, adjusting his tie. "It is for the best, Mrs. Washington. For everyone." "No," I said. "It is for the best for you. But I am not interested in what is best for you. I am interested in justice." I walked over to the playpen. I picked up the crying baby. He felt heavy in my arms. He smelled like Dante. It made my skin crawl, but I held him tight. "This boy is Dante's son," I announced. "That makes him my stepson, legally speaking. And since my husband is incapacitated, I am the one who decides where he goes." I looked at the Millers. "You are not taking him to Europe. You are not hiding him in some boarding school. And Mama Joyce is certainly not getting her claws on him to sell him to the highest bidder." "Then what do you propose?" Richard asked, sneering. "You want to raise the child of the mistress who ruined your marriage. You are going to play mommy to the bastard son of your husband." I looked down at the boy. Leo. His name was on the bib. Leo looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. He stopped crying. He rested his head on my shoulder. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not love. Not yet. It was responsibility. It was power. "I am going to take him," I said. Tevin gasped behind me. "Keira, no, you cannot." I silenced him with a look. "I am taking him," I repeated. "He is coming home with me. He is going to live in the house his father mortgaged to buy his mother a penthouse. He is going to be raised in the light, not in the shadows." I looked at the Millers one last time. "And you are going to pay for it," I said. "Excuse me," Eleanor sputtered. "You heard me. You want to avoid a scandal. Fine. I will keep your secret. I will not go to the press. I will not tell the world that the prestigious Miller family has a mixed-race grandchild born of infidelity. But in exchange, you are going to set up a trust fund for Leo. A blind trust. $5 million. Managed by me." Richard turned red. "That is extortion." I smiled. It was the smile of a shark. "No, Richard. Extortion is what Mama Joyce was planning to do. This is child support." I turned to Tevin. "Go to the car, Tevin. Now." He looked at me like I was crazy, but he obeyed. He walked out. His shoulders slumped, defeated. I turned to Evelyn, the nanny. "Pack his bag," I said. "He is leaving." As I stood there holding the child who represented everything I hated, I realized something. This boy was not a burden. He was a weapon. He was the ultimate leverage. Mama Joyce wanted him. The Millers wanted to hide him. Dante didn't even know he was exposed. By taking him, I controlled them all. I looked at Leo. "You and me, little man," I whispered. "We are going to make them all pay." I walked out of that house with my head held high, carrying my husband's sin in my arms, ready to bring him home. The game had just changed, and I was holding the king. Bringing Leo home was a victory, but the war was far from over. I had the child, and I had the husband, but I knew that to truly win, I needed to secure the future. I needed to make sure that when the dust settled, I was the one standing on top of the mountain, not buried underneath it. I spent the next few days in a frenzy of forensic accounting. I dug through every digital corner of Dante's life. I cracked passwords. I recovered deleted emails. I was looking for the money he had hidden, but what I found was something far more sinister. It was late on a Thursday night. The house was quiet. Leo was asleep in the nursery, and the only sound was the humming of the refrigerator. I was sitting at the kitchen island with Dante's laptop. I had found a hidden folder in his cloud drive labeled simply London. I thought it would be travel itineraries or meeting notes. I clicked it open. Inside was a single PDF file. It was a life insurance policy from a company I had never heard of, Monarch Life and Casualty. I opened the document. My eyes scanned the numbers. Coverage amount $5 million. I whistled low. $5 million. That was enough money to disappear. That was enough money to start a new life in a non-extradition country. That was enough money to buy a penthouse and raise a secret son in luxury for decades. I scrolled down to the beneficiary section. My heart was pounding. I expected to see my name. I expected to see our daughter's name. We had been married for 10 years. I was his wife. I was the mother of his child. But my name was nowhere to be found. Beneficiary 1, Joyce Washington, 50%. Beneficiary 2, Chloe Miller, 50%. I stared at the screen. The date of the change was highlighted in the metadata. It was dated exactly 1 week before his trip to London, 1 week before he was found in that motel room. He had erased me. He had deliberately and calculatedly removed me from his financial legacy. He had planned this. He knew he was going into a dangerous situation, or maybe he just wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, his mistress and his mother got the jackpot while I got nothing. He was going to leave me with the debt, the mortgage, and the broken heart while they split $5 million. The rage that washed over me was cold. It was not the hot, fiery anger of the first few days. This was the cold, hard steel of a woman who realizes she was never loved. I was just an obstacle. I was just a placeholder until he could cash out. I picked up the phone. It was almost midnight, but I did not care. I called the 24-hour customer service line for Monarch Life. I put on my best frantic wife voice, the one that sounded scared and confused. "Hello," the operator answered. "Monarch Life, how can I help you?" "Hi," I said, letting my voice tremble. "My name is Keira Washington. My husband Dante Washington has a policy with you. Policy number 89442. "One moment, Mrs. Washington, let me pull up the file." I waited. The hold music was a cheerful jazz tune that clashed with the murder in my heart. "Okay, I see it here," the operator said. "I see that there was a claim initiated by a Mrs. Joyce Washington 2 days ago. Of course she did. Mama Joyce did not waste any time. She probably called the insurance company before the ambulance even arrived at the hospital." "Yes," I said. "My mother-in-law mentioned that. But there is a confusing situation. You see, my husband is not dead. He is in a coma." There was a pause on the line. "Oh," the operator said. Well, that changes things. The death benefit is only payable upon proof of death. If he is alive, the policy is still active, but no payout can be made. I knew that. But I needed to know about the beneficiaries. I needed to know if the change was irrevocable. I understand, I said, but I am concerned about the beneficiaries. My husband was not in his right mind before the accident. I believe he was coerced into changing the names. The operator sighed. I am sorry, Mrs. Washington. The policyholder has the right to change beneficiaries at any time. The last change was made electronically with two-factor authentication. It appears valid. My stomach dropped. Valid. He had cut me out legally. However, the operator continued and I heard the sound of typing. There is a flag on this account. A hold has been placed on any potential distribution. A hold, I asked. Why? Well, there are two complications. First, one of the beneficiaries, Chloe Miller, has been reported deceased. We received her death certificate yesterday. Since she predeceased the policyholder, her share would typically revert to the contingent beneficiaries or back to the estate, dead. Chloe was dead. That was one problem solved. 50% of the money was back in play. And the other beneficiary, I asked, holding my breath. What about Joyce Washington? The operator lowered her voice as if she was gossiping. Well, ma'am, we received a notification from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. A freeze order has been placed on any assets or potential payouts connected to Joyce Washington due to a pending federal investigation for tax evasion and money laundering. I almost dropped the phone. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. A week ago, right after I found the credit card debt Dante had racked up in my name, I had done something petty. I had gone to the IRS whistleblower website. I knew Mama Joyce ran a cash business. She owned a boutique hair salon, and she was always bragging about how she kept 2 sets of books, one for the government and one for her pocket. I had tipped them off. I gave them her name, her business address, and a rough estimate of the cash she was hiding. I never thought it would work this fast, but apparently the IRS does not play around when they smell blood. Oh my goodness, I said, feigning shock. Tax fraud. That is terrible. My poor mother-in-law. It is a standard procedure, the operator said. Until the investigation is cleared, we cannot release any funds to her, even if your husband were to pass away today. The money would sit in escrow. I sat back in my chair. A smile spread across my face. It was a wicked smile. So let me get this straight, I said. My husband is alive, so you cannot pay. If he dies, one beneficiary is dead, and the other is frozen by the feds. So the money is just sitting there. That is correct, the operator said. Thank you, I said. Thank you so much for your help. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. Dante had tried to screw me over. He had tried to give $5 million to the women who helped destroy our marriage. But fate, or maybe just my own vindictive brilliance, had intervened. But I was not satisfied with the money just sitting there. I did not want it in escrow. I wanted it. And I realized in that moment that I had the power to take it. The operator had said the magic words. The policyholder has the right to change beneficiaries at any time. Dante was the policyholder, but Dante was a vegetable. He could not type. He could not speak. He could not use two-factor authentication. But I was his guardian. I had refused to sign the papers for Mama Joyce. I was still his legal proxy. I held his medical power of attorney, and thanks to the emergency court filing I had made earlier that day to block Mama Joyce, I had been granted temporary conservatorship over his estate. That meant, legally speaking, I was Dante. I could sign for him. I could make decisions for him. I could change his insurance policy. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I could not call the lawyer now. But I could get everything ready. I opened a new tab on the laptop. I logged into the Monarch Life portal using Dante's password, Chloe123. It really was pathetic how predictable he was. I navigated to the policy management screen. There it was, the Change Beneficiary button. I clicked it. A warning box popped up. You are about to change the legal beneficiaries of this policy. This action is binding. I clicked Continue. I deleted Joyce Washington. I deleted Chloe Miller. The cursor blinked in the empty field. Who should get the money? I typed in my own name, Keira Washington, 100%. Then I paused. No, that was too easy. That looked suspicious. If Dante died and I got all the money immediately, it might look like I had a motive. I needed to be smarter. I needed to hide my greed behind a mask of benevolence. I backspaced. I typed in the Dante Washington Family Trust. I would create a trust that I controlled, a trust ostensibly for the care of our daughter, and yes, even for the care of little Leo. It would look like the noble act of a father wanting to provide for his children. But as the trustee, I would control every penny. I could pay myself a management fee. I could buy properties for the trust to invest in. I could use that $5 million to build the empire I deserved. I entered the details. I hit submit. The screen prompted for a verification code sent to Dante's phone. I reached into my pocket. I had his phone. The police had given it to me along with his wallet and his wedding ring. The phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Your verification code is 4922. I typed it in. Success. Your policy has been updated. I sat there staring at the screen. It was done. With a few clicks of a mouse, I had reclaimed $5 million. I had snatched the fortune out of Mama Joyce's greedy hands and put it safely into my own pocket. The next morning, I went to the hospital early. I walked into Dante's room with a spring in my step. He was awake. His eyes followed me as I entered. "Good morning, husband," I said cheerfully. I pulled up a chair. I took his hand. It was limp and heavy. "I have some news, Dante," I whispered. "I found your life insurance policy, the one for $5 million. His eyes widened. He blinked rapidly. He was scared. He knew what he had done. He knew he had cut me out. "You were a naughty boy, Dante," I said, patting his cheek, "giving all that money to your mommy and your girlfriend, leaving your wife and children with nothing. That was not very nice." He stared at me. His pupils were shaking. "But do not worry," I continued. I fixed it. I pulled out a printed copy of the confirmation page. I held it up for him to see. "Look," I said, pointing to the beneficiary line. "The Dante Washington Family Trust. Sole trustee, Keira Washington." He made a sound, a gurgling, choking sound in his throat. It was the sound of a man screaming who has no voice. I laughed. "Oh, do not be upset, baby. I did this for you. Now you can rest easy knowing that your money is safe with me." I leaned in closer. "And the best part is, your mother thinks she is still getting it. She thinks she is going to be rich. I cannot wait to see her face when she finds out. The IRS has frozen her accounts, Dante. She is broke. And now, thanks to me, she is going to stay broke." I kissed his forehead. "You tried to destroy me, Dante. You tried to leave me penniless. But all you did was make me rich. Thank you." I stood up and smoothed my dress. "Now I have to go meet with a lawyer to set up the trust documents. You be a good boy and rest. We do not want you dying too soon. Not until the paperwork is finalized." I walked out of the room, leaving him alone with the beeping machines and the crushing weight of his own failure. He had played a high-stakes game, and he had lost. He had lost his freedom. He had lost his mistress, and now he had lost his fortune. And me, I was just getting started. $5 million was a lot of money. But it was not just about the cash. It was about the control. I controlled his life. I controlled his death. And now I controlled his legacy. I walked down the hospital corridor, my heels clicking on the floor. I felt like I was floating. I took out my phone and dialed the number for the best estate attorney in Atlanta. "Good morning," I said when the receptionist answered. "My name is Keira Washington. I have a $5 million estate I need to structure, and I need it done today." I hung up and smiled. Life was good. Revenge was sweet. And I was rich. I thought I had won. I thought the game was over and I was the one holding the trophy. I had the money, I had the house, I had the secret son, and I had my husband trapped in a prison of his own flesh. But I forgot one crucial rule of the universe. Evil never dies quietly. It fights back. It claws its way up from the grave when you least expect it. It started on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the hospital room filing my nails while Dante lay in bed. I had just finished telling him about how I was redecorating his home office. I told him I was painting it a soft lavender and turning it into a playroom for Leo. I saw the rage in his eyes. I saw the way his pupils dilated. He hated me, and I loved it. But then I saw something else. His index finger, the one on his right hand, it twitched. I froze. I stared at the hand resting on the white sheet. Maybe it was a spasm. Maybe it was just a nerve firing randomly. But then it happened again. He lifted his finger a fraction of an inch and tapped the mattress. Once. Twice. I looked up at his face. He was smiling with his eyes. It was a terrifying look. It was the look of a predator who had just found a hole in the fence. Before I could react, the door opened and Dr. Patel walked in. He was beaming. He had a team of residents behind him. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice full of excitement. "We have seen some remarkable activity on the brain scans this morning. The swelling is going down faster than anticipated. We believe Dante is regaining some motor function." I forced a smile. "That is wonderful, doctor," I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. "It is more than wonderful," Dr. Patel said. "It is a breakthrough, and because his cognitive function is fully intact, we want to try something new. We want to give him a voice." My stomach dropped. A voice. Dante did not need a voice. A voice was dangerous. 2 nurses wheeled in a cart. On it was a large monitor with a specialized camera attached to the bottom. I knew what it was. I had seen it in documentaries. It was an eye-tracking communication device. It would calibrate to Dante's pupils and allow him to type on a virtual keyboard just by looking at the letters. I stood in the corner clutching my purse. I watched as they set it up. I watched as they positioned the screen in front of Dante's face. I watched as they calibrated the sensors. "Okay, Dante," Dr. Patel said. "Look at the center dot." "Good. Now look at the letter A." "Good." The machine made a soft chiming sound. "Mrs. Washington." "Why don't you come closer?" the doctor said. "I am sure there are things he wants to say to you." I walked to the side of the bed. I felt like I was walking to the gallows. I looked at the screen. I looked at Dante. He stared at me. His eyes were cold and focused. He began to type. It was a slow, agonizing process. He looked at a letter. The machine highlighted it. He held his gaze. The machine typed it. K-E-I-R-A, Keira. I smiled nervously. "He knows my name," I said, trying to sound relieved. He continued. T-R-I-E-D, tried, T-O-2-K-I, L-L, kill, M-E. The room went silent. The air was sucked out of the space. The residents looked at the floor. The nurses looked at each other. Dr. Patel looked at the screen, and then he looked at me. "Keira tried to kill me." I let out a breathless laugh. It sounded frantic. "Oh, doctor," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "He is confused. The trauma, the drugs. He does not know what he is saying. He thinks he is still in the nightmare." But Dante was not done. He stared at the screen again. He was typing faster now, fueled by adrenaline and hatred. S-H-E-P-O-I-S-O-N-E-D, poisoned, M-E. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not confusion. This was a calculated strike. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was framing me. He was using his disability, his status as the victim, to turn the tables. Dr. Patel stepped between me and the bed. His body language had changed. He was no longer the friendly physician talking to a grieving wife. He was a protector guarding his patient. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice stiff, "I think it would be best if you stepped out of the room." "No," I said, taking a step forward. "You cannot believe this. This is ridiculous. I found him like that. I was the one who called the police. I have been here every day taking care of him." Dante's eyes darted back to the screen. F-O-R-M-O-N-E-Y, for money. That was the nail in the coffin. The doctor knew I had taken control of the assets. He knew about the disputes with the mother. To him, it all fit. The greedy wife, the wealthy husband, the sudden tragedy. "I am going to ask you again," Mrs. Washington, Dr. Patel said. "Please leave the room, or I will call security." I looked at Dante one last time. He blinked once, a slow, deliberate blink. It was a wink. He had checkmated me. I walked out of the room. My legs were shaking. I sat down on a bench in the hallway and tried to breathe. I tried to think. I needed to call my lawyer. I needed to call Tevin, but before I could unlock my phone, I saw two uniformed officers walking down the hall. They were not the regular hospital security. They were Atlanta PD, and walking behind them was a man in a cheap suit who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Detective Miller. They walked straight past the nurse's station and stopped in front of me. Mrs. Washington, Detective Miller said. I stood up. Yes. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. Am I under arrest? I asked. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Not yet, the detective said. But in light of your husband's statement and some new evidence that has come to light regarding the toxicology report, we need to clarify a few things. New evidence. What new evidence? I nodded. I knew my rights. I knew I should ask for a lawyer, but I also knew that if I lawyered up right now, I would look guilty. I needed to find out what they knew. I followed them to the elevator. People were staring. The nurses who used to praise me were now whispering behind their hands. The fall from grace was swift and brutal. In the interrogation room, the air was cold and smelled of stale coffee. Detective Miller sat across from me. He opened a file folder. So, Mrs. Washington, he started, let's talk about the fentanyl found in your husband's system. It was an overdose, I said. He was with a woman. They were partying. It happens. Is that right? The detective asked. He pulled out a piece of paper. Because according to the lab report, the amount of fentanyl in his system was massive. But here is the strange part. There was no residue on his hands, no powder on his nose. It was ingested, likely in a drink. He leaned forward. And now your husband wakes up and says you poisoned him. He says you gave him a drink before he left for the airport, a special protein shake you made for him. I stared at him. That was a lie, a bold-faced lie. Dante hadn't drunk anything before he left. He is lying, I said. He is trying to frame me because he knows I found out about the affair. He knows I found out about the money he stole. The detective sat back and crossed his arms. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. We looked into the money, Mrs. Washington. We saw the changes to the life insurance policy. We saw the transfer of funds. We saw the trust you set up. $5 million is a hell of a motive. I felt the walls closing in. They had been watching me. While I was busy playing detective, they were investigating me. I did that to protect my family, I said. He was stealing from us. To the detective, that sounded like a confession. It sounded like justification. Look, Mrs. Washington, he said. Here is the reality. We have a victim who is alive and pointing the finger at you. We have a financial paper trail that shows you benefiting from his incapacity. And we have a witness, his mother, who claims you threatened her and the baby, Mama Joyce. Of course, she had joined forces with Dante. They were a team again, the axis of evil. I stood up. I am not saying another word without my attorney, I said. The detective nodded. He expected that. You are free to go for now, he said, but do not leave the city. We are seizing your passport. And Mrs. Washington, stay away from the hospital. If you go near your husband, we will arrest you for witness intimidation. I walked out of the police station into the blinding afternoon sun. I felt naked. I felt exposed. Dante had flipped the script. He had used the very system I believed in, the justice system, to entrap me. He knew that as a black woman with a motive, I would be the perfect villain. He knew that his word as a wealthy, successful man would carry more weight than mine, even if he had to type it with his eyes. I got into my car and locked the doors. I gripped the steering wheel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive off a cliff. But then I thought of Leo. I thought of the innocent baby waiting for me at home. If I went to prison, Mama Joyce would get him. She would sell him to the Millers, or worse, raise him to be just like Dante. I could not let that happen. I looked at my phone. I had a voicemail from the detective. He had forgotten to tell me one thing. By the way, Mrs. Washington, he said on the recording, the DA is fast-tracking this. We expect to have an arrest warrant ready within 48 hours. Just thought you should know. 48 hours. I had 2 days. 2 days before they came for me. 2 days before I lost everything. I drove home in a daze. When I walked into the house, it felt different. It felt like a temporary shelter, not a home. I went to the nursery. Leo was awake. He was standing in his crib holding onto the rails. When he saw me, he smiled. He reached out his chubby little arms. I picked him up. I buried my face in his neck. "I am sorry, little man," I whispered. "I am so sorry." But sorrow wasn't going to save us. Action was. I put Leo down and walked to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled half of it. I needed to think. Dante's accusation was powerful, but it was based on his word. I needed proof, irrefutable proof that he was a liar, proof that he was a criminal, proof that he and his mother were the real villains. I had the recording of Mama Joyce. That was good, but not enough to clear me of attempted murder. I had the financial records. Those proved he was a thief, but they also gave me a motive to kill him. I needed something else. Then I remembered the charity gala. Dante and Mama Joyce had planned a massive fundraiser for next week, the Phoenix Foundation. It was supposed to be his triumphant return to society, or at least a sympathy tour to raise money for his recovery. They were going to use that stage to bury me publicly. They were going to announce the divorce. They were going to parade Leo out if they could get him. But the gala was tomorrow night. They had moved it up. I had seen the email notification on Dante's phone before the police took it. Tomorrow night, all of Atlanta's elite would be there. The mayor, the district attorney, the press. If I was going down, I was going to take them all with me. I went to my office and started pulling out files. I started printing everything I had, the photos of him and Chloe, the bank statements showing the money laundering, the emails between him and the drug dealer who supplied the fentanyl. Wait, I froze. The drug dealer. I hadn't looked closely at that file yet. I had found a series of encrypted messages on an app Dante used. I had assumed it was just for setting up the party favors. I opened the file again. I read the messages carefully. One message from a user named Phantom sent the day before the London trip. Package ready, 2 doses. One for fun, one for sleep. Make sure you mix it right. And Dante's reply, "Don't worry, I know how to handle her. She won't wake up." My heart stopped. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about Chloe. She won't wake up. Dante didn't overdose accidentally. He overdosed because he mishandled the mix he prepared for Chloe. He was planning to kill her. He was planning to kill his mistress. Why? Because she was threatening to expose the baby, because she wanted more money. It didn't matter why. What mattered was that I had the proof. I had his own words planning a murder. If I showed this to the police now, they might bury it. They might say it's ambiguous. They might say I forged it. The detective was already biased. No, I couldn't give this to the police. Not yet. I needed to give it to the world. I looked at the invitation for the gala on my computer screen. It was at the St. Regis Hotel. Black tie. I wasn't invited. In fact, I was probably on the security blacklist. But I was Keira Washington. I knew every back door, every service entrance, and every security protocol in that hotel because I had audited them 3 years ago. I picked up the phone and called Tevin. "Tevin," I said, "are you sober?" "Yeah, Keira, I am," he said, his voice rough. "Good. Put on your best suit. We are going to a party." "What party?" he asked. "Dante's party," I said. "The one where he plans to destroy me." I looked at the stack of evidence on my desk. "We have 48 hours before I get arrested, Tevin. But I only need 24. Tomorrow night we're going to walk into that ballroom and we're going to burn it to the ground." "But Keira," Tevin said, sounding scared, "the police said you cannot go near him." I laughed. It was a cold, dangerous sound. "I am not going near him, Tevin. I am going to end him." I hung up the phone. I walked to the closet and pulled out a dress. It was red. Blood red. The kind of dress you wear when you want to be seen. The kind of dress you wear to a funeral when you are not mourning. Dante thought he was clever. He thought his typing finger and his lies could stop me. He thought the system was built for men like him. And he was right. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I built the system. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who used to dig them up for a living. I went to the safe and took out the flash drive. I loaded everything onto it. The recording, the financial records, the text messages. This was it, the nuclear option. If this failed, I would go to prison for the rest of my life. I would lose Leo. I would lose my name. But if it worked? I looked at myself in the mirror. I applied a coat of red lipstick. "Game on, Dante," I whispered. "You want to talk? Let's talk. But this time, everyone is going to hear what you have to say." I turned off the lights. The house was dark, but my path was clear. I was ready for the public execution. And I wasn't the one who was going to die. The St. Regis Hotel was glowing like a beacon in the Atlanta night. The valet line was backed up down the block, filled with Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. It was the kind of event that made the front page of the society papers. The Phoenix Gala, a fundraiser for victims of domestic tragedy hosted by the miraculous survivor Dante Washington and his devoted mother Joyce. It was sickening. The irony was so thick I could taste it like bile in the back of my throat. They were raising money for victims while the real victim was standing in the shadows wearing a red dress and holding a flash drive that contained their destruction. I watched from the mezzanine level. I had bypassed the main entrance. I knew that Mama Joyce had hired private security specifically to keep me out. She had probably given them my photo with a big red X over my face, but she forgot that I used to audit this hotel. I knew that the service elevator in the kitchen bypassed the ballroom checkpoints. I knew that the staff entrance on the loading dock was rarely guarded after 7. Tevin and I had slipped in unnoticed. We were ghosts haunting a party thrown in our honor. Tevin looked nervous. He was tugging at the collar of his suit. He was staring down at the ballroom floor where hundreds of people were drinking champagne and eating caviar. "Look at them," Tevin whispered. "They are eating it up." He was right. The room was packed. I recognized the mayor. I recognized the district attorney. I recognized the partners from Dante's investment firm. They were all there nodding solemnly as they looked at the giant screens displaying photos of Dante before the accident, photos of him smiling, photos of him on vacation, photos that I had taken. They were mourning the man he used to be and celebrating the hero they thought he was now. And there in the center of it all was Mama Joyce. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that was far too tight and far too flashy for a somber occasion. She was holding court. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and a handkerchief in the other, dabbing at dry eyes whenever a camera pointed her way. She looked like the grieving mother of the year. She was shaking hands, hugging donors, and whispering lies into eager ears. I gripped the railing. My knuckles were white. "She is telling them you did it," Tevin said, reading my mind. "I know," I said. I could see it in the way people looked around the room. They were whispering. They were looking for the monster. They were looking for the wife who poisoned her husband. Suddenly the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. A hush fell over the crowd. The orchestra stopped playing. Mama Joyce walked up to the microphone. The spotlight caught the sequins on her dress, making her sparkle like a disco ball. She tapped the mic. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Thank you all for being here tonight." She paused for effect, looking out at the crowd with sad eyes. "As many of you know, my son Dante has been through hell. 2 months ago, he was a vibrant, successful man with the world at his feet. Today, he is fighting for his life, fighting to recover from a tragedy that should never have happened." She took a deep breath. "We thought it was an accident. We thought it was a medical emergency. But as a mother, you know when something is wrong. You know when evil has touched your child." A murmur went through the crowd. This was it, the public accusation. My son was betrayed. She continued, her voice hardening. He was betrayed by the person who was supposed to love him the most, the person who stood at the altar and promised to cherish him. Instead, she left him to rot. She abandoned him in his time of need. And we now believe she did something far worse. She did not say my name. She did not have to. Everyone in that room knew who she was talking about. I could feel the judgment radiating from the floor below. They pictured me as a witch, a gold digger, a black widow. "But tonight is not about her," Mama Joyce said, lifting her chin. "Tonight is about him. Tonight is about the phoenix rising from the ashes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my son, the strongest man I know, Dante Washington." The double doors at the side of the stage opened. A gasp went through the room. Dante was wheeled out by 2 nurses. He was sitting in a high-tech motorized wheelchair. He was dressed in a tuxedo, but his body was slumped. His hands were strapped to the armrests. His head was supported by a brace. He looked frail. He looked broken, but his eyes, even from the balcony I could see his eyes. They were scanning the room. They were sharp. They were alive. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood up, a standing ovation for the survivor. It was deafening. They were cheering for a man who had planned to murder his mistress. They were cheering for a monster in a tuxedo. Dante was wheeled to the center of the stage. A large screen was positioned behind him. A specialized camera was mounted on his wheelchair, pointed at his face. This was the eye-tracking technology Dr. Patel had been so excited about, the technology that gave him a voice. The applause died down. The room became silent again. Everyone waited. They wanted to hear from the miracle man. Dante stared at the camera. On the big screen behind him, a cursor began to move. A virtual keyboard appeared. He blinked. The first letter appeared on the screen, THANKYOU. A mechanical voice echoed through the speakers. It was a cold, robotic sound devoid of human warmth. "Thank you." The crowd clapped politely. He continued typing, his eyes darting from letter to letter with practiced speed. He had been practicing this. He had been rehearsing his lines for days. MASURVIVOR, I am a survivor, the robotic voice announced. Tevin gripped my arm. This is sick, Keira. We have to stop this. Not yet, I whispered. Let him dig the hole deeper. Dante continued. IWASPOISONEDBYMYWIFE. The words appeared on the screen in giant black letters. I was poisoned by my wife. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath. This was not just an implication anymore. This was a direct accusation, a public execution of my character. Flashbulbs started popping. Reporters were scribbling furiously. Mama Joy stood next to him, nodding solemnly, wiping away fake tears. She placed a hand on his shoulder, comforting the victim. Dante wasn't finished. SHEWANTEDMYMONEY. She wanted my money, the voice boomed. I felt a fire burning in my chest. It wasn't shame. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. He was projecting his own sins onto me. He was the one who wanted money. He was the one who stole. He was the one who poisoned. Dante paused. He looked directly at the camera. It felt like he was looking right at me wherever I was. He knew I would be watching. He wanted me to see this. TONIGHTIANNOUNCE. Tonight I announce, IAMFILINGFORDIVORCE. I am filing for divorce. The crowd murmured again, sympathetic whispers. Good for him. He deserves better. Dante typed one final sentence. The kill shot. SHEWILLGETNOTHING. She will get nothing. Mama Joyce took the microphone again. You heard him, she said, her voice ringing out. He is breaking free. We have already contacted the authorities. We are working with the district attorney to ensure that justice is served. That woman, Keira Washington, will not only be removed from this family, she will be behind bars where she belongs. The crowd cheered. They were cheering for my imprisonment. They were cheering for my destruction. I looked at Tevin. He was shaking with anger. Let's go, he said. Let's go down there and smash that screen. I put a hand on his chest. No, Tevin. We don't smash the screen. We take over the screen. I looked down at the stage. Dante looked smug, or as smug as a paralyzed man can look. He thought he had won. He had the crowd. He had the narrative. He had the sympathy. But he didn't know that the sound engineer in the booth at the back of the room was a man named Marcus. And Marcus owed me a favor. A big favor from when I audited his taxes 3 years ago and saved him from an IRS lien. I had texted Marcus 5 minutes ago. I had told him to be ready. I pulled the flash drive out of my purse. It felt heavy in my hand. It was small, but it contained the weight of truth. Dante, I whispered to myself, you want to tell a story? You want to talk about poison and money and betrayal? Okay, let's tell the whole story. I turned to Tevin. Are you ready? I asked. He straightened his tie. He took a deep breath. I am ready, he said. We walked toward the stairs. My heels clicked on the marble floor. It was the sound of a countdown. Below me, Mama Joyce was soliciting donations. Please give generously, she said, to help Dante rebuild, to help us fight this legal battle against the woman who tried to kill him. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I stood at the back of the ballroom. The doors were closed. The security guards were watching the stage, not the back of the room. I signaled to Marcus in the booth. He saw me. He nodded. He cut the microphone. Mama Joyce tapped the mic. Hello? Hello, feedback screeched through the speakers. The crowd covered their ears. Then the lights went out. All of them. The ballroom was plunged into darkness. The crowd gasped. There was confusion. Is it a power outage? What's happening? In the darkness, I walked forward. The crowd parted from me not because they saw me, but because I moved with a force that pushed them aside. I walked straight down the center aisle toward the stage. Then a single spotlight cut through the dark. It didn't hit the stage. It hit me. I stood there in my blood-red dress, holding the flash drive high in the air like a weapon. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mama Joyce squinted into the light. Who is that? She demanded. I lowered my arm. I looked straight at her. I looked straight at Dante. Hello, husband, I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the silence it carried to every corner of the room. You invited the press. You invited the police. You invited the whole world to hear your story. I started walking toward the stage. But you forgot to invite the only witness who matters. Dante's eyes widened. He blinked rapidly. Blink, blink, blink. Panic. Security, Mama Joyce screamed. Security! Get her out of here! 2 guards started to run toward me. But Tevin stepped out from the shadows. He stood back to back with me. He looked like a linebacker ready for the sack. Don't touch her, he growled. I didn't stop walking. I locked eyes with Dante. You said I poisoned you, I said, my voice rising. You said I wanted your money. I reached the stairs of the stage. I walked up them slowly. 1 step, 2 steps. I stood next to his wheelchair. I towered over him. I looked at the camera. I looked at the crowd. He told you I am the villain. And maybe I am, because I am the one who is going to destroy him. I turned to the screen. Marcus, play it, I said. And then the real show began. I stood center stage, bathed in the white-hot glare of the spotlight. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the electric wheelchair beside me. Dante was staring at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and terror. He did not know what was coming. He thought I was there to beg. He thought I was there to make a scene that would only make him look more like a martyr. He had no idea that I wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. I was the auditor, and I had come to close the books. I looked out at the crowd, the mayor, the donors, the press. They were all waiting. You all came here tonight to hear a story, I said, my voice steady and clear. You came to hear about a tragedy, about a man struck down in his prime, about a wicked wife who abandoned him. I walked behind Dante's wheelchair. I placed my hands on his shoulders. I felt him flinch. And my husband is right, I continued. There is a villain in this story. There is a monster who destroyed this family. But he got one thing wrong. He told you I wanted his money. I laughed. A cold, sharp sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. What money, Dante? I signaled to the booth. Marcus, roll the tape. The giant screen behind us flickered. The words, I was poisoned by my wife, disappeared. In their place, a grainy black and white video appeared. The date stamp in the corner read, 3 months ago. The location stamp said, the Sapphire Motel Room 204. A gasp rippled through the audience. It was unmistakably Dante. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He was standing by a cheap motel dresser, using a credit card to chop up lines of white powder. And he wasn't alone. Chloe walked into the frame wearing nothing but a towel. She laughed and kissed him. Then she leaned down and snorted the powder. I watched the crowd's reaction. The mayor looked away. Mama Joyce dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, but no one looked at the mess. They were glued to the screen. "This is the man you are cheering for," I said, narrating the video like a documentary. "This is your hero. This is where he was when he told me he was at a board meeting. He wasn't working on a merger. He was working on an overdose." On the screen, Dante handed Chloe a syringe. The resolution was high enough that you could see the liquid inside. "He didn't just use drugs," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "He administered them. That is fentanyl, ladies and gentlemen. And that is the woman he left me for." Dante's heart monitor started beeping faster. He was trying to move his head, trying to look away, but he couldn't. He was forced to watch his own sins played back in high definition. "But that is just the beginning," I said. The screen changed. Now it was a spreadsheet, a complex web of bank transfers and shell companies. "You accuse me of wanting your money, Dante. But let's talk about where that money came from." I pointed to the screen. "These are transfers from the Phoenix Foundation, the charity you are donating to tonight. You think you are helping victims. But look closely." I highlighted a column. 90% of the donations are funneled into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account linked to the Garcia cartel. The room erupted. Journalists were on their feet, shouting questions. The district attorney looked like he was about to vomit. "My husband isn't an investment banker," I announced. "He is a money launderer. He washes blood money for drug dealers. That is why we have the big house. That is why we have the cars. It was never his genius. It was his criminality." Mama Joyce ran onto the stage. Her face was twisted with rage. "Stop it!" she screamed. "Cut the feed. She is lying. These are deep fakes." She tried to grab me, but Tevin stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Let her finish." Tevin growled. "Oh, I am not done with you, Joyce," I said, turning my attention to her. I signaled Marcus again. "You told everyone I abandoned him. You told the doctors I was dangerous. You tried to take guardianship so you could control his assets." The screen went black. Then an audio waveform appeared. "Play it," I commanded. Mama Joyce's voice boomed through the speakers loud and clear. It was the recording I had made in the hospital, but there was more. There was a second recording I had captured when she didn't know I was listening. "I don't care if he recovers," the recording of Joyce said. "Just keep him sedated, doctor. I need him incompetent. If he wakes up, he might change the will. Just fix the medical records. Make it look like brain damage. I will pay you double what the hospital pays." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of 1,000 people realizing they had been played. Mama Joyce froze. Her face went pale under her heavy makeup. She looked at the crowd. She saw the disgust in their eyes. She saw the police officers at the back of the room starting to move toward the stage. "You bribed the doctor," Joyce, I said. "You kept your own son in a vegetative state because you wanted his insurance money. You are not a grieving mother. You are a parasite." Dante was making a sound now, a low, guttural moan. He was looking at his mother with pure hatred. He had partnered with her to destroy me, but she had been planning to betray him all along. "But I have one last thing to share," I said. The finale. I walked over to Dante. I leaned down so our faces were inches apart. "You remember the baby, don't you, Dante?" His eyes widened. He blinked once. "Yes. You told everyone you wanted a divorce because I was a bad wife. But the truth is you wanted a divorce because you had a son with your mistress. A secret son." I stood up and addressed the crowd. "My husband has a 1-year-old child named Leo. He hid this child from me. He bought a penthouse for this child using our life savings. He was planning to leave me and raise this boy as his heir." I paused. I let the weight of that sink in. Dante loved that boy. It was the only thing he truly cared about. His legacy, his bloodline. The screen changed one last time. It was a DNA report, a paternity test. "But Dante, there is something you don't know," I said softly. "Something even Chloe didn't tell you before you killed her." I pointed to the screen. "When I found Leo, I ran a test. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to confirm that he was your son. I looked at the results projected 10 feet tall behind us. Probability of paternity 0%. Dante stopped breathing. The beeping of the monitor stopped for a second, then resumed in a frantic, erratic rhythm. "He isn't yours, Dante," the crowd gasped. "But here is the twist," I said. Here is the part that is going to haunt you for the rest of your miserable life. I ran the sample against the family database. Because Leo looks like you. He has your eyes. He has your skin. I thought maybe he was your brother's child, or a cousin's. I clicked the remote. A second document appeared. Probability of paternity 99.9%. Father Otis Washington. The scream that came out of Mama Joyce was inhuman. It was a shriek of denial. Otis Washington, I repeated. Your stepfather Dante. The man who raised you. The man you call Dad. The crowd was in shock. People were covering their mouths. Some were turning away in horror. Your mistress wasn't just sleeping with you, Dante. She was sleeping with your father, your stepfather. While you were buying her jewelry, she was in bed with the man who sat at your dinner table every Sunday. I looked at Dante. He was crying. Real tears. Tears of absolute devastation. His entire world, his entire ego had just been shattered. He wasn't the alpha male. He wasn't the king. He was a cuckold, a fool. He had destroyed his marriage, ruined his life, and committed murder for a child that belonged to his daddy. Leo is your brother Dante, I whispered. Not your son. Your brother. The humiliation was total. It was visceral. I could feel the waves of shock rolling off him. He closed his eyes tight, trying to shut out the world, trying to shut out the truth. But he couldn't. I turned to the crowd one last time. My name is Keira Washington. I am a forensic accountant, and I have just audited this family. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a loud thud that echoed like a gavel striking a sounding block. Case closed. I didn't wait for the applause. I didn't wait for the police to storm the stage and arrest Mama Joyce. I didn't wait for the paramedics to rush to Dante as his vitals crashed from the shock. I walked down the stairs. Tevin was waiting for me at the bottom. He looked at me with awe. Let's go home, Tevin, I said. We have a baby to raise. We walked out of the ballroom through the parted sea of stunned socialites. Behind me, I heard the chaos erupt. I heard Mama Joyce screaming at the police. I heard the medical alarms wailing. I heard the shatter of the image they had tried so hard to build. I walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It smelled like rain and justice. I had lost my husband. I had lost my innocence, but I had won my life back. And as I looked up at the moon, I smiled. Dante wanted a legacy. Well, I just gave him one. He would be remembered forever, not as a hero, but as the punchline to the darkest joke in Atlanta. I got into the car. Drive, Tevin, I said, and we drove away, leaving the ashes of the Phoenix behind us. The silence that followed my revelation did not last long. It was shattered by the sound of heavy doors bursting open at the back of the ballroom. The police had been waiting in the wings. I had sent the evidence package to Detective Miller exactly 1 hour before the gala began. I sent him the bank transfers showing the money laundering. I sent him the recordings of Mama Joyce bribing the doctors. And I sent him the emails connecting Dante to the drug cartel. I gave the authorities everything they needed on a silver platter, and tonight they came to collect. Detective Miller marched down the center aisle, flanked by 6 uniformed officers. The crowd of wealthy donors parted like the Red Sea. They were terrified. These were people who only saw police officers at charity balls or in their rearview mirrors. They had never seen a raid, but that is exactly what this was. It was a raid on the facade of respectability that the Washington family had built. Mama Joyce was the first to realize what was happening. She was still standing on the stage, trembling from the shock of the DNA results. When she saw the uniforms, her survival instinct kicked in. She tried to run. It was a pathetic sight. A woman in a tight gold sequined gown trying to scramble off a stage in 6-inch heels. Mrs. Joyce Washington Detective Miller shouted, his voice booming over the chaos. "Stop right there!" Joyce froze. She looked around wildly for an exit. She looked at Dante. She looked at me. "You cannot do this!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the detective. "Do you know who I am? I am the mother of a hero. This is a misunderstanding. That woman is lying." Detective Miller walked up the steps to the stage. He did not look impressed. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted under the spotlight. "We have a warrant for your arrest, Mrs. Washington," he said calmly. "For what?" she shrieked. "Being a good mother. For insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and bribery. The detective listed the charges as he grabbed her wrists. He spun her around roughly. The crowd gasped as the cuffs clicked shut. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Click, click, the sound of justice. I did nothing. Joyce yelled, struggling against his grip. It was her. It was Keira. She set me up. Dante, tell them. Tell them I protected you. She looked at her son, begging for help. But Dante could not help her. Dante could not even help himself. He was sitting in his wheelchair, staring blankly at the giant screen where the DNA results were still projected. Probability of paternity 0%. The words were burned into his retinas. The realization was tearing his mind apart. The boy he had sacrificed everything for. The boy he had stolen for. The boy he had planned to kill his wife for. That boy was his brother, his stepfather's son. I watched Dante's face. It was turning a deep shade of crimson. His breathing was becoming ragged. The machine that gave him a voice was silent now, but his body was screaming. His monitor began to alarm. A high-pitched, continuous whine that cut through the noise of the ballroom. Dante's eyes rolled back in his head. His body went rigid against the straps of the wheelchair. He was seizing. Medic, someone shouted. Dr. Patel, who had been standing in the front row watching his career evaporate, rushed onto the stage. He checked Dante's pulse. He looked at the pupils. He is having another stroke, the doctor yelled. Call an ambulance. His blood pressure is through the roof. I stood there and watched. I did not move to help. I did not hold his hand. I just watched. The shock of the truth was too much for his damaged brain. The stress of the humiliation, coupled with the devastating news about his father and his mistress, had caused a massive hemorrhage. His body convulsed one last time and then went limp. He wasn't dead. I could see the shallow rise and fall of his chest, but he was gone. The Dante who thought he was a mastermind. The Dante who thought he could outsmart me. The Dante was gone. What was left was a shell, a broken vessel trapped in a darkness deeper than before. As the paramedics rushed in to stabilize him, I turned my attention to the side of the room. There, standing near the emergency exit, were the Millers, Richard and Eleanor. They had been trying to slip away unnoticed during the chaos. They wanted to disappear into the night and pretend they had never met the Washingtons. They wanted to go back to their country club and their mansion and scrub this scandal from their lives. But they couldn't, because the press had seen them. The reporters who had been invited to cover a charity gala were now covering the scandal of the century. Cameras were flashing in their faces. Microphones were being shoved toward them. "Mr. Miller, is it true your daughter had a child with her fiancé's stepfather?" a reporter shouted. "Mrs. Miller, did you know about the money laundering?" another screamed. Richard Miller looked like he was going to faint. His face was gray. He put a hand up trying to block the cameras. "No comment," he stammered. "We have no comment." But the crowd wasn't letting them off that easy. The wealthy elite of Atlanta were looking at the Millers with undisguised disgust. These were people who valued reputation above all else, and the Millers were tainted. They were the parents of the mistress who slept with her father-in-law. They were the grandparents of the secret baby. They were radioactive. I saw Eleanor Miller look at me across the room. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to stop it. She wanted me to say something to save them. She looked pathetic. The woman who had sneered at me in the nanny's house, the woman who had offered me hush money, now she was the one who needed silence. I just smiled at her, a cold, hard smile. And then I turned my back. I watched as the police led Mama Joyce away. She was still screaming threats, still blaming everyone but herself. Her wig was crooked, her makeup was running. She looked like a clown who had lost her circus. I watched as the paramedics loaded Dante onto a gurney. He looked small, defeated. He was going back to the hospital, not as a hero, but as a prisoner of his own body and soon a prisoner of the state. Detective Miller stopped next to me on his way out. He looked at the flash drive I was still holding in my hand. Then he looked at me. "You took a big risk, Mrs. Washington," he said quietly. "You could have been charged with withholding evidence." I looked him in the eye. "I didn't withhold anything, Detective," I said. "I just delivered it in a way that ensured it wouldn't be buried." He cracked a small smile. He knew I was right. He tipped his head. "Don't leave town," he said. "We will need your statement." "I am not going anywhere," I replied. "This is my town now." He walked away. The ballroom was clearing out. The donors were fleeing like rats on a sinking ship. The waiters were starting to clean up the shattered glass. Tevin walked up to me. He put an arm around my shoulder. He was shaking, but he was smiling. "We did it, Keira," he whispered. "We actually did it." I looked at the empty stage. The screen was still on frozen on the DNA results. "Yes, we did," I said. But I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel happiness. I felt a deep, hollow satisfaction. It was the feeling of balancing a ledger. The numbers finally added up. The debt was paid. I looked down at my red dress. It was perfect. It was the color of victory. "Let's go, Tevin," I said. "Leo is waiting for us." We walked out of the St. Regis, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind. The flashing lights of the police cars painted the night sky. The sirens wailed a lullaby for the wicked. I got into my car and checked my phone. My bank app showed the balance of the trust fund I had set up. $5 million. Safe. Secure. I had destroyed them. I had stripped them of their dignity, their freedom, and their money. Mama Joyce was going to prison. Dante was going to a long-term care facility under police guard, trapped in his own mind with the knowledge that he was a fool. The Millers were social pariahs. And me, I was Keira Washington, the survivor, the winner. I started the engine. The radio came on. It was playing a song about heartbreak. I turned it off. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was free. It has been 6 months since the night of the gala. 6 months since I stood on that stage in my red dress and burned my husband's empire to the ground. People ask me if I feel guilty. They ask me if I regret destroying a man who was already down. I look them dead in the eye and I tell them no. I do not feel guilt. I feel peace, because I did not destroy Dante. I just handed him the mirror and forced him to look at his own reflection. Dante is not dead. Death would have been a mercy, and I was not in a merciful mood. He is currently residing in the medical wing of the Georgia State Penitentiary. The judge was not swayed by his condition. In fact, the judge was disgusted. He sentenced Dante to 20 years for money laundering and conspiracy to commit murder. Because of his paralysis, he spends 24 hours a day in a specialized bed staring at a gray concrete ceiling. He has no window. He has no view of the skyline he used to think he owned. He has no voice to command anyone. He is trapped in the silent prison of his own mind, surrounded by the literal prison of the state. The nurses tell me he cries sometimes. They say tears roll down his face when he hears the other inmates playing basketball outside. He was a man who loved control, and now he cannot even control when his lights are turned off. That is his hell, and he built it brick by brick. As for me, I have been busy. The morning after the gala, while the police were still cataloging evidence, I made some financial moves. I still had my power of attorney, and the freezing orders on Dante's personal accounts had not fully processed yet. I logged into his brokerage account. I saw the news of his arrest was starting to leak. The stock price of his firm was wobbling. I did not hesitate. I sold everything. I liquidated his entire portfolio. I dumped millions of dollars of stock onto the market seconds before the crash. By the time the trading bell rang and the world realized Dante Washington was a criminal, his assets were already converted to cash and sitting safely in the trust account I controlled. I used that money to pay off every single debt he had saddled me with. I paid off the credit cards. I paid off the fraudulent loans. And then I did something for myself. I drove to the south side of the city, to the small house where my parents raised me. The house we lost to foreclosure 5 years ago when my father got sick. It was up for sale again. I walked in with a cashier's check for the full asking price. I bought it back. I gave the keys to my parents and watched my father cry for the first time in my life. That was better than any penthouse. That was dignity. But I did not stop there. I realized that my talent for digging up dirt was too valuable to waste. I had uncovered a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise from my kitchen table. Imagine what I could do for other women. I rented a small office space in downtown Atlanta. I put a gold plaque on the door. It reads, "The First Wives Club, Private Investigations." My phone has not stopped ringing. Every day, women walk through my door. Women who suspect their husbands are cheating. Women who think their partners are hiding assets. Women who feel crazy because the men in their lives are gaslighting them. I sit them down, I pour them a cup of coffee, and I tell them to dry their eyes. Then we get to work. I help them find the hidden accounts. I help them track the late-night movements. I give them the weapon of truth so they can fight back. I am not just an auditor anymore. I am an avenging angel in a pencil skirt. Tevin is doing better too. He started therapy. It has been hard for him to reconcile the betrayal, but having Leo around has helped. We are raising Leo together. It is strange raising the child of your husband and your sister-in-law, but Leo is innocent. He is a sweet boy with a loud laugh. We changed his last name. He is a Mitchell now, my maiden name. He will never carry the weight of the Washington legacy. He will grow up knowing he is loved, not for who his father was, but for who he is. And now, here I am. I am sitting in the Diamond Lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I am holding a glass of vintage champagne. I am looking out at the tarmac, watching the planes take off into the endless blue sky. Dante told me he was going to London. He lied. He used that trip as a cover for his sins. He wanted to cross the ocean to hide his money and his secrets. Well, I decided not to let his frequent flyer miles go to waste. He had racked up over 1 million miles on his credit card. Miles he earned while spending money on his mistress. Miles he earned while buying diapers for his secret baby. I transferred them all to my account. I am not going to London. London is too rainy. I am going to Paris. I have booked the penthouse suite at the Ritz. I have booked a private tour of the Louvre. I am going to eat croissants and drink wine and flirt with handsome French men who do not know my name. I am going to live. I look down at my boarding pass. First class, seat 1A, the seat Dante always reserved for himself. I take a sip of champagne. It tastes like freedom. It tastes like victory. To everyone watching this, I want you to know something. They will tell you that you are weak. They will tell you that you are crazy. They will tell you to sit down and be quiet. Do not listen. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. If you feel that cold shiver down your spine when he walks in the room, trust it. Check the trunk. Check the phone. Check the bank account. Do not be afraid of what you will find. Be afraid of living a lie. I was a victim. I was a punching bag. I was a fool. But today I am none of those things. I am a mother. I am a business owner. I am a survivor. The flight attendant announces boarding for my flight. I pick up my Louis Vuitton bag, the one I bought with the last of the insurance payout. Goodbye, Dante. Enjoy your cell. I hope the walls are thick enough to keep out the sound of my laughter. I walk toward the jet bridge. I do not look back. I never look back, because the view in front of me is too beautiful to miss. This is Keira Washington signing off. If you liked this story, if you felt the fire in my belly, then please hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Share it with a sister who needs to wake up. Let's start a revolution of women who refuse to be victims. Thank you for watching. And remember, the best revenge is not just surviving, it is thriving. Paris, here I come.